immediately resorts to the gun. Penny Marshall, ITN, Moscow.
Other news now. A young mother and her 6 children are tonight preparing to face Christmas alone after a hit-and-run driver killed their father. 34-year-old David Button was knocked off his bicycle near his home in Buckinghamshire on Sunday night.
David Button was a doting father of 6 who was working extra night shifts at Tesco's in Slough to buy presents for the children. He was cycling along this road on Sunday night when he was hit by a car. Friends have left flowers where he fell.
He was hit from the rear. We gather he was thrown backwards and struck the car. The bicycle was dragged along the road. The driver then stopped, got out of the car, walked back, looked at my brother lying on the grass verge, and then went back to his car, got back in and went off at speed. I think it's the most callous thing I've ever heard of. After 5 little girls, 9 months ago, he had the son that he'd always wanted, and now he won't see him grow up.
At David's home, his widow Noreen was too distraught to talk, but the family says she's been overwhelmed by support from friends and neighbours, giving money and toys for the children. Justin Jones, ITN, Slough.
The Northern Ireland Secretary Peter Brooke today called on the people of Ulster to work together to end the evil of terrorism. He said his thoughts were with those who'd lost loved ones in the violence. The funerals of 3 of the 5 men who died in the weekend's wave of sectarian shootings were held today.
Mr. Brooke, visiting security forces on Christmas duty in West Belfast, vowed that terrorism could not win. He welcomed the IRA 3-day ceasefire, but challenged the gunmen to give up violence for good if they were serious about peace.
That is what we all want. That would truly set the stage for a happy new year. If they cannot face that challenge, the people, north and south, can only conclude that the IRA's real Christmas message came earlier this month in Belfast and Craigavon.
Mr. Brooke was referring to the IRA's bombing campaign, which caused millions of pounds worth of damage in Belfast and Craigavon, Newtown. He went on to visit another recent target for IRA bombers, Belfast Musgrave Park Hospital's military wing, where 2 soldiers were killed 7 weeks ago. As his tour was underway, the families of 3 men murdered in sectarian shootings last weekend were spending Christmas Eve burying their dead. A priest had this message for the sectarian murderers.
They might well be saying to their friends and members of their own families, Happy Christmas. Do the words not stick in their throats when they must know that they have brought grief and mourning into other homes at Christmas time?
Once again, both sides of the religious divide in Ulster will be praying for peace this Christmas after a year in which 94 people have been killed in the Troubles. Andrew Simmons, ITN, Belfast.
2 Lebanese boys who were brought to Britain for treatment after being paralysed by sniper fire are facing a grim future in Beirut 4 years after returning home. Bilal Shahib and Samia Ibrahim were treated at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital.
This Christmas, Bilal Shahib has little to look forward to. In spite of severe spinal injuries, his elderly mother has to provide the only medical treatment he receives. His paralysed body is covered in sores. It's a far cry from the optimism of 4 years ago, when he was one of 2 Lebanese boys being taught to walk again by British medical staff. Along with 8-year-old Shamir Ibrahim, Bilal was rescued from Beirut's refugee camps by the English doctor Pauline Cutting and was cared for at Stoke Mandeville Hospital for 6 months. Even at the time, both boys knew they were returning to an uncertain future. Shamir spends most of his days in the family's 1-roomed flat.
I want to go to London, to go to school and go to hospital.
In the bomb-shelled refugee camp to which Bilal returned, access for paraplegics is not a priority. He rarely gets out in his wheelchair and without medical supervision has given up trying to walk. In 1987, both boys saw their horizons broadened. Today their prospects are bleak. Their only hope that the generosity of the British public will once again offer them the chance of a better future. Caroline Kerr, ITN, Beirut.
High street stores today reported a last-minute rush by Christmas shoppers, but they say it doesn't compare with previous years. Retailers are hoping that a late spending spree will boost sales that have been depressed by the recession.
After a slow start to Christmas shopping, stores across the country are reporting a last-minute rush to buy presents. In Bristol, though, more small businesses have gone under than anywhere else in the country, and people say this year they're spending less.
I've only bought for the kids in my family because of obviously the mortgage rate and everything.
Well, obviously going for smaller items, you know. I think recession's affected everyone really, one way or another.
It's a very different story in Glasgow, where some retailers report sales up 15% compared to Christmas week last year.
We've always had this idea of the prudent Scot, and consumer debt per head in Scotland tends to be lower anyway, so people, again, haven't been under the same pressures.
In London's Brent Cross shopping centre, early sales are helping the late spending boom. Yesterday was the centre's busiest ever, but that may rebound in January, when trading during the traditional sales period could be slow. Here at Brent Cross, sales are up on last year, with retailers reporting their busiest last 2 days of Christmas shopping in living memory. Glenn O'Glaser, ITN at Brent Cross Shopping Centre.
And the main news again, Mikhail Gorbachev will tomorrow formally announce his resignation as the president of the Soviet Union. And that's all from the news at 5:40. Have a good evening and a lovely Christmas.
Hello, good evening. Don't bank on a white Christmas tomorrow. You're either going to have to dream of it or just enjoy it from your Christmas cards. The odds are heavily stacked against the sort of pleasant Christmas you've seen for tomorrow. The reason why is because the winds are now coming off the Atlantic. In fact, our cloud scan sequence here for today shows a whole pile of cloud around, but what it did was circulate the British Isles, leaving mainly clear skies, apart from a couple of local variations. Now, that cloud will be thick enough in the very far north of Scotland tonight to give off a few spits and spots of drizzle, but for the most of us, it's very much a case of clear skies, and that in turn means dipping temperatures, so watch out for some frost around. And southern areas could well see some patches of mist and fog floating around as well, so Rudolph and co had better watch out whilst out and about delivering those presents tonight. As we go into Christmas Day, that fog could well linger on in a fair few places tomorrow, but for most of England and Wales, it's a case of a bright, crisp, very pleasant Christmas morning. In direct contrast, for Scotland, the weather's not really showing very much Christmas cheer at all, with rain and drizzle for the very far north and fairly dull skies for the rest of the country. Then whilst we're tucking into our Christmas lunch, well, the rain and drizzle, it gets up and goes, going into Northern Ireland and sinking as far south as the north of England. At the same time, the very far north of Scotland does indeed brighten up with the occasional blustery shower. At least the southern half of Wales as well as England hangs on to that bright weather for the whole of Christmas Day. As far as temperatures go for Christmas Day, well, they really are holding their own, more or less. Apart from those areas where the fog persists on lingering on, they do take a dip there. Bear in mind the wind is strengthening all the while, especially in the very far northwest of Scotland. And that's all from me for the time being. Enjoy the rest of your Christmas Eve. I leave you with a weather summary.